Layne, welcome to the show. It's great to see you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. I've heard a lot about the show. I've listened to a few episodes and I'm glad to be here.
All right, very good. Well, we're excited you're here as well. Obviously, I've gotten to know you a little bit, and most people are familiar with IDEA, but for those that aren't, maybe that are not, haven't spent time in Texas or less familiar with the broader national charter school landscape, could you give us just a quick spark notes on yourself and the work you do for IDEA today?
Yeah, absolutely. So my career has essentially been mostly in charter school operations. I told you earlier, I started out as an assistant principal of operations when I worked at Uplift Education, started out at campus level, kind of worked my way through the central office there, moved over to IDEA about 7 years ago, was a VP of Auxiliary Services and then Chief Operating Officer for the past 5 years. And recently, I was promoted to Deputy Superintendent of Operations, will maintain Chief Operating Officer. But working with IDEA has been a great experience so far. And it's a large, complex organization. We have 85,000 students across 3 states, so Texas, Florida, and Ohio. And that's we're at 146 campuses now, I think is what or sorry, 146 schools is what we're up to now. So, yeah, so that's idea in a nutshell.
Yeah, large and complex might be an understatement, especially given the, the comparables for other networks that we've had on the show. So I want to start there actually because there's not many people who sit in the seat you sit in terms of peers from a sheer scale standpoint in the charter space. And so I wanted to ask you just kind of out the gate when you think about school operations, scaling operations at a network, with 85,000 students in 146 schools, what's like the hardest part that people outside of larger systems tend to maybe miss or underestimate about operating at that scale?
Yeah, I think a lot of times when people think about scaling, they think about opening new schools, right? And
Yeah.
actually, I think that's the easiest part, right? It's seeking out the land, it's making sure in the right community, it's doing all the things to open a new school. The tough part is maintaining excellence at the school once you open it, right? And so, I think obviously with scale means you have to have really great systems in place, and if you don't, then you don't see the consistency and execution that you want to see across campuses throughout your organization. And the other is that you can't forget about like your talent development either, right? Like
Mm.
the people in the seats, whether that's at the national level, the regional level, but particularly at the campus level, is paramount, right? You have to have the right people in the right places for you to be able to continue to scale and operate really high quality schools, across the organization. Because one school doesn't perform well, and it can drag down the entire district. So I would say really ensuring that, you start with scalable systems in place. I don't know how many times over my career, we started, well, I'm going to do this system for this year and I'll figure something out for next year. Well, then like the
Right.
next year comes out for the next year. And then pretty soon you have 60 campuses and you wish you would have started out with a system that scaled better. Right. And so I think it's really making sure that you're focused on scale from the beginning because you don't know what tomorrow brings.
Yeah, I wanted to ask as, you know, like you mentioned, the opening of new schools is, in some ways the easy part, but as the portfolio grows, you have to maintain excellence. To your point, you have to build systems. What do you feel like, as you reflect on some of the various stages of growth, what are some of the constraints or pressures that you feel like mount at different levels of scale that sort of shape how you think about operational strategy today? Because I would imagine there's different pressure sets on the organization at the current scope and scale you're operating at versus when you had maybe 20 campuses. Like maybe take us inside some of the considerations that you all have to balance when making strategy decisions, just given sort of the implications of that type of, geographic and location scale.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I think about pressures, I think about like internal pressures and like what capacity does your organization actually have to support and continue to scale, and I think through like external pressures and capacity. So For example, like what is the current environment that you're living in? Like, regulatory environment, for example. You have Texas, Florida, and Ohio, very similar at times in priorities from state legislatures or from authorizers, but other times very different, right? So you may have a complete new set of requirements and laws to implement in Texas that you don't have to in Florida or Ohio, or may even conflict with what you're required to do in a different state. And so it's one, we have to be compliant with each state we're operating in within. So how do we ensure we're in compliance, we are operationalizing the compliance, and we're not letting it, be a drag on how we're operating at the same time. You also have like economic pressures, right? So I think right now is a great example. We have, inflationary measures. We have costs of labor, costs of goods sold are going up, right? And so whenever you have those different market pressures, then it impacts the way you operate. Maybe you're not able to, buy the things you used to be able to buy, or maybe not do as many new cool initiatives as you're trying to implement. So I think it really depends on kind of the seasons, right? There are times when you feel a little more free in how you're operating, and then times whenever it feels like you're just trying to, which of the really important pressures and guardrails that I'm operating within takes priority in how we're trying to operate. So it's really a prioritization effort most of the time. And how do you continue to move the organization along, not get stuck, also stay in compliance, also get the outcomes you want to see at the same time, keep your team happy, and repeat.
Just do all those things, and then you're good.
Just that's
Yeah.
it. That's it. That's all you have to do. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
all you have to do. Well, I wanted to explore a real world kind of example of this because I thought it would be helpful for other operators that are at various sizes. We've got single school operators as well as large scale networks, mature CMOs that listen to this podcast. And you and I offline were talking a little bit about just some of the work you all have done around security over the last 12 to 18 months. And I think that's a great example because it's something that is has to be implemented at every campus and scaled as regulations change and as the market changes and as technology changes. And so I thought it would be helpful to unpack this a little bit and draw out some potential insights or learnings for other organizations that are trying to think about, how do we scale, initiatives, operations, systems, talent at our organization, and we can kind of use this as a foil. So could you maybe start by telling us a little bit about some background on, the security side of things, what you guys have been working on, and sort of what you've been working towards as well as far as implementing, a new security strategy?
Yeah, of course. Safety and security has, through my time, it has always been a priority for schools, but I think, unfortunately, through different years of different tragedies, we've had to ramp up how we're dealing with safety and security. And some of that has been, our initiative, and some of that has been forced through our state authorizers, right? Whether it's in Florida, Ohio, or Texas. The unfortunate tragedy not too long ago in Uvalde really pushed the Texas legislature to really think about how our schools are operating from a safety and security standpoint. And in turn, in I think every legislative session since then, they have rolled out new requirements around safety and security that schools have to abide by. And um, so that's one set of I would say, well, there are requirements that we have to execute, but beyond that, I think 5 years ago, between the exec team and board of directors, we made an intentional decision that, of course, safety and security were always a top priority, but we were going to double down on the investments and time and effort into ensuring that our staff and students are as safe as they can be when they're at an idea school. And so it really starts out, it's more than just complying with your state authorizers. It's what kind of culture are you trying to create with your safety and security program? And we know that in order for teachers to teach and students to learn, and us for us to fulfill our mission, people have to feel safe in their space,
Right.
right? So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They have to feel safe first. And so that's really the foundation of our safety and security program. And we made a pretty significant investment to ensure that our buildings were hardened, right? So we invested in gates and fences at all of our campuses. The state required you to put ballistic film on all doors and adjacent windows. The state required you to put cameras at all of your exterior doors. We went ahead and reinvested in an entirely new security software system that would allow us to actually like roll footage all the way to our central office for all of our campuses. We state required you to have armed peace officers at your campuses. So now all of our campuses have an armed peace officer every single day. Then there are other factors in, the state has also rolled out a number of audits, right? They want to make sure all of the laws that they're saying, you have to follow, they're actually following them. So
Right.
we're required to, the state actually conducts an intruder detection audit once a year at 75% of the campuses in the state. So you don't know when they're coming, but at some point during the year, someone from the Regional Service Center from TEA is going to come to your campus, see if they can get into your campus. Is your gate open? Are there any doors around your campus open? They go pull all the doors. Does anyone, once they're inside, does anyone ask them where their visitor badge is, right?
Right.
Are they able to go to classrooms and open doors? And so then that report, whether there's a finding or not, gets reported up to the state level. We then have to report that finding also to our board. There's also a new district vulnerability assessment where TEA knowingly comes out to your campuses and does a full assessment, does interviews of your staff. Do they know the protocols? Does interviews with students. Do they know the protocols? And it's really to check to ensure that everything is being executed. So while there are a lot of requirements being passed down, these are requirements that I don't mind being compliant with, right? They're keeping our students and our staff safe.
Right.
But it's a constant battle to stay on top of it, right? You're talking about an organization that has thousands of exterior doors in the
I
district,
was just gonna
thousands of
ask,
security
like,
cameras.
what's
It's a
the
lot.
math on, like, exterior doors? Because I was thinking, like, for one school, you have a lot of doors, but then multiply that by however many campuses you guys have, it's literally thousands of opportunities to quote
Yep.
unquote "fail the test." And so it creates, this domino effect of, we have to be, crossing our T's and dotting our I's across a massive geographic range and so many
Right.
points of potential failure.
Well, if you think about like, look, I mean, we have what I think like 1,100 sets of double doors at a campus. So that's you're approaching like 2,400, 2,400 doors. Think about how many 85,000 students, right, going in and out of these doors every single day. All the staff going in and out of the doors.
Right.
And it's like not that people are propping doors open. We have very specific discipline measures around that. But it's like, sometimes there's like a wind tunnel that comes through the hallway,
Yep.
right? And the door doesn't shut all the way, right? And so it's like, how are you creating an environment where you're like not only like training staff every time you walk out of a door to make sure it closes, but how are you also training your students, talking to your students about the same thing? How are we creating a culture of safety and security and not just like asking people to execute on protocols that we require them to?
So tell us a little bit about, because there's so many layers to this. How did you all think about, um, what the role of the network is, and things that you knew you needed to report ultimately up to the board about? Like, how did you all think about what the network handles versus what is handled at the local level, and kind of balancing, like, as an organization, we need to comply with these things, but then we're also trying to drive this strategy regardless of legislation around keeping our students safe. And then there's training and culture, and then there's technology investments and data. Like, talk us through a little bit of about the balance between, like, standardizing security requirements versus building a culture and, talent at the local level where you can trust things are getting implemented with fidelity.
Yeah, I would say this is an area where as an organization, we're very heavily centralized, right?
Okay.
Now, doesn't mean that there's no flexibility or autonomy at the regional or campus level, but in particular with safety and security requirement, this one is pretty standardized across the organization. The board cares deeply about safety and security. We report to them every single month during closed session. They ask a lot of really great questions. They push us a lot. They give us a lot of feedback. So it starts at the top, right? We have a defined set of core safety requirements for the district. And we say, hey, here are the 15 things that have to be true at every single campus. We have CCT teams at every single campus that are responsible for executing on our core safety practices. We have regional teams and national teams. And so we do a lot of training throughout the year for these CCT teams. We also have a lot of ways for us to get visibility into what's happening at the campus level. So earlier I said the TEA requires weekly door sweeps, for example. Well, we require them daily and we require them to be put into a power app that we built so that we can track, are all the doors being checked every single day? And the Power App also asks questions like, is the door operating? Is it broken? Well, what's broken about it? So then that report gets funneled up. So I can tell you at any given day, how many doors across the district do we have with some sort of incident, right? And then that the safety security team works closely with the facilities team to make sure that they have visibility into it. Our regional facilities managers are following up with campus facilities managers, so that's kind of an example of the type of like data visibility we have.
Mhm.
But it's the same thing through like safety drills, for example. Like our APOs at the campuses are reporting, hey, I completed my safety drill, and they report it through Raptor. Raptor bubbles it up. So we have a pretty robust safety and security dashboard that we look at often. One to help guide, to give us, give us an indication where we're at right now, help us guide decisions that we're making, but also we can use them as coaching opportunities as well, where we're seeing any gaps.
I wanna spend a little time on the data piece because I think there's probably some people listening who are surprised by the fact that you literally have a dashboard where you're checking every
Right.
single door, on a daily basis, but I think, like, that's the level of specificity and sort of, integrity at the local level that has to be implemented in order to reach the kinda system-wide goals. How do you and maybe the broader leadership team think about which operational data points truly matter? Because everybody has someone they report to, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure you go into conversations with your CEO, you have to report to the board on certain metrics, the broader executive team, and then you've got teams under you that similarly have to report on certain metrics. Initiative that is both, legislative and kind of org driven. How do you think about KPIs at the different layers of the organization and kind of balancing, like, are we over metricing? That's a
Yeah.
technical term, over metricing, or are we tracking things that are truly indicators that we have a system that's working and we can action on it?
Are we talking specifically about safety and security KPIs or org in general?
Yeah, let's keep it within safety and security.
Okay. So first of all, we have our core safety requirements, right? And we have those that are from the state. And so that is data that we are required to report to the state regardless. So the state of Texas has a platform, Sentinel, and you are reporting, that's where your IDA audits get reported. That's where you're uploading all of your um, safety and security procedures every single year. Also, where you're uploading, these different reports that we're being asked to do from the TEA. So we're already required to report that information. There's also a requirement from the state to report some of that information to the board every single month. So there are some things that are just required that you have to report. There are other things at the board level that we know from past experience that the board really cares about. So
Yeah.
we'll bring them an update on, hey, here's construction progress on, our fence and gate projects, for example, because they ask a lot of questions about progress and making sure that all of our campuses have the 15 things that we said these were core to how we're operating with safety and security at IDEA. So when it comes to the board level, there are specific things that one is required and two, we know they're going to be asking about. So we just bring that information to them. At the exec level, for example, it's the same things, but it's also if there are consistent gaps we've seen, from certain regions or certain campuses, we'll bubble those up. But we do a lot of the work through our regional teams. So executive directors, RDOs work very closely with our safety and security team. We have a safety and security chat for every single campus that our safety and security team manages. But there's a lot of communication and visibility in any safety incident that's happening at the campus level. So not only are we getting, data with, if you will, through all of our reporting mechanisms, but then we're also getting, you know, the actual like what's happening on the ground information from campuses in a given single day. And then we also can take all of that reporting, right, and say, well, how many types of incidents did we have involving, a threat this month or this year? How many types of incidents did we have involving potential suicide, for this month or this year? And so we can use that and that data to then get to the right teams, so that as they're thinking about how do they lean in and do interventions, or how are they creating program curriculum for the following year, how are they staying informed of what's happening at the campus level to make those decisions. So it kind of depends on the audience and the context.
Yeah, makes total sense. Could you maybe give us a practical example of where this, multifaceted flow of data across the various teams all the way up to your level and ultimately the board, where data surfaced an operational or security issue early and you all were able to say, okay, we're getting the data that this is potentially an issue, and now we're going to pivot and adjust our decision making. Do you have any practical examples that come to mind, and just specifically as it relates to security?
So something that comes to mind is, we have kind of a tiered intervention support system for incidents, right? So if X incident happens at a campus, this is the follow up response. Or if an audit happens at the campus and there's a finding, then this is a follow up response. If there are two findings in a row, then this is kind of the next step. So we use that information to then work with our regional partners or our national partners to say, hey, well, we've noticed a trend in incidents at this campus. Here is the type of intervention that we're actually going to put in place. That's a requirement. So we had a campus recently that had two or three findings in a row from the state. And we said, hey, actually, every single day, someone from the regional team is going to be on that campus and we're doing walkthroughs because it is that important that we get this right. Then that information is bubbling up to our national safety and security team. And we actually then let the board know, hey, we've had this one campus that's been a challenge. Here's the progress. And recently we were able to report, hey, they were audited twice this year by the state of Texas, and both times they passed their audit this year. They're now off of the kind of needs improvement list, if you will. So that's kind of how we think about, an example of if there are things happening at campus, we're seeing, and then put an intervention in place or have a reaction to how we're supporting that campus.
I want to shift us to talking a little bit more about enablement and talent development, because I think you brought this up at the beginning of the call. You can have great systems, you can have the best design system in the world, but if you don't, enable your people to implement it and ultimately continue to be developing the talent pipeline, the organization can't really scale. You mentioned in that example there's times where the regional team or the central team has to get pulled in to directly solve an issue or support, a local team. Um, Central teams can't be everywhere, and
Right.
you as the COO, deputy superintendent, you certainly can't be everywhere. How does that reality kind of shape the authority and responsibility that you all try to intentionally push closer to campuses? Maybe you could talk a little bit more about how the ops team is, or the security team, I don't know if those roll into the same function, are structured, and how you all think about ensuring local leaders are enabled to effectively execute.
Yeah. So we at the national level, we kind of tier it out, right? So at the
Okay.
national level, we have a national school safety council, right, where it has leaders from across departments at the HQ level and some community members, where we're like really talking through what does design of our safety and security systems look like, and how are we not working in silos at the HQ level, which often is described of campuses and regions. How are we
Yep.
working across teams to ensure that how we're designing across each of our teams and holistically is aligned and what makes the most sense. We then also have regional crisis teams that get a series of training throughout the year. Their primary role is to lean in and support campuses in their region whenever there is an incident happening. We also do a lot of training for campus crisis teams. Everyone has a specific role on the campus. The principal's incident commander. We walk them through, drills, tabletop exercises throughout the year, define their roles, ensure they know what and how it needs to be executed. And they do get some level of autonomy at the campus level and how they're executing on the requirements from the guardrails. And so we take, we layer our training and support through those different trainings that we have throughout the year. And so everyone is most everyone is clear on roles and responsibilities, whether at the campus, regional, or national level. And we we talk about safety a lot. I mean, I would say in operations, at least you know probably 25 to 30% of the trainings we do through any given year are around safety and security, because we know it's a top priority and something we absolutely have to get right.
As the organization has grown, and you could use security as an example, but maybe thinking a little bit more broadly now for other ops leaders that might be listening to this, what skill sets in particular have you found that you all are investing in or wanting to invest more in? Like as the team continues to grow and you identify, man, we really need to make sure we're enabling folks at the local level on these specific skill sets. What are some of the things that come to mind as sort of like perennially things you all want to enable future leaders on?
So, as an organization, we have a set of leadership competencies, right? There are 5 of them, and we kind of base our training structure in those competencies. And we have those same competencies, and we use those in our our staff development cycle, our 2x2s, our APRs, et cetera. We also ingrain them into trainings throughout the year. In operations, we have several specific training programs that have implemented over the past 5 years. So, for example, we have an APO foundations program for year one APOs and an APO Apex program for year two APOs. We also have what we call BOLD, Breakthrough Operations Leadership Development, for our HQ team members that we installed a couple of years ago, because we realized, hey, we're doing all of this great training and support for campus and regional team members, but we're not actually doing it, or mainly campus team members, we're not actually doing it enough for our HQ team members, whether that's at the national team or the regional team. So
Right.
we're going to be layering on different programs to support. We also have like our Operation Summer Institutes, where we have opportunities to layer on training and support throughout the year. But really intentional about the number of development opportunities that we have. And it's also something that we hear feedback from at the campus and regional level. Like, people want to be developed. They want, better training. They want time with fellow APOs or fellow RDOs, because the operations world can get very lonely at times, right? You're in
Yeah.
one position at the campus, you're one position in the region, and there's a lot going on. I mean, ops are dealing with a lot of different scopes of work, a lot of different customers. You're kind of getting like squished from both directions. And so it's really important that, only engaging, our team members, they have opportunity to engage with each other as well. So we work holistically at the organizational level. We have some guardrails and like leadership competencies we want to develop. And then specifically in operations, we layer in that managerial leadership training with also like specific skill set training depending on what role you're in.
Yep, makes total sense. Okay, cool. Super helpful. I want to ask a couple final questions as we come to a close here about advice for organizations that are maybe just starting their scaling journey. So, thinking back to, idea when it was 20 sites and not 146, um, and sort of what you've learned sitting in this seat now for a number of years, what are maybe 1 to 2 pieces of operational advice you would offer to those organizations that are in a fortunate position where they're replicating quickly and really trying to scale their impact? Maybe things you wish you had invested in earlier or spent more time on, or maybe spent less time on. Anything come to mind there?
Well, I think first is in the growth process, right? Like, being very clear about why you're scaling and where you're scaling, right? There are a lot of different factors in the environment that can push you or pull you to one particular place to build a school. And I would say making sure you do your due diligence on what does it look like to operate a school in this location next year, in 5 years, and 10 years. There are a lot of resources out there, right, that show demographic trends. You can see like, are schools closing in this area? Are they opening in this area? Like, what do housing trends look like? I would say like that's the first thing people should do, is make sure that they are being very diligent about the way they are scaling. We all know we're operations. We all know you need processes. You need scalable systems. I've mentioned repeatedly how important the talent pipeline is, ensuring that you're
Mhm.
focused on development. And I actually shared this at the Charter School Growth Fund CEO convening last week, where not all organizations are going to have the capacity to do what we're doing and build out complete programs for multiple
Right.
years of work, right? But you have to start somewhere, right? And so, like, what resources are in your community? What resources are, in Texas, we have regional service centers, for example, that can help
Mhm.
support. The operations world, the CIO world is very helpful, and a lot of really great people in this world. And, I would, say like, tap into those resources, whether you're part of CSGF, whether you're a part of state conferences, national conferences, or just reach out, right? I mean, reaching out. I've
Yeah.
had several COOs at different networks reach out directly to me asking for support or for ideas. And I'm, happy to support any way I can. But I think that's the other thing I would say is, as you're scaling, don't hesitate to reach out to others who have been in the same situation and learn from them, right? Learn what went really well, learn mistakes that were made, to ensure that you're not repeating, history.
Yeah, really good advice. I can just, anecdotally, double click on your comment that COOs are really willing to help. I think our podcast has been a testament to that. I feel like so many people who've come on the show have said, like, "Oh my gosh, I made so many mistakes and I'm happy to talk about them." And, if I can be helpful to others, absolutely. I think it's one of the unique things about the charter school community. And so totally agree. Don't be afraid to send that cold email. People will, they're not going to respond right away because they're in operations and they're running around putting out fires, but
Right,
they
right.
will eventually. Um, all right. So looking forward, maybe, I asked you to reflect on things you wish you had done, but looking forward, what are you kind of most excited about as you think about what the ops team is doing at IDEA? The next 12 to 24 months. It's certainly not an easy time to be operating schools right now. There's a lot of macro pressures in the market around enrollment, inflation, healthcare costs, all sorts of things.
Right.
But what are you jazzed up about, that you guys are working on?
Well, I'm personally very excited to get some critical hires made for the operations team for the organization. So we just hired a chief talent officer. Really excited about Ryan in that role. Currently hiring for my backfill, so the chief campus operations officer and our chief information officer. And so we've gone through several rounds of interviews for both of those roles. I'm really excited about the candidates that we have for both roles, but specifically for campus operations. I'm really excited about what's to come for the next leader of that portfolio. The other thing I would say is we are very close to finishing what we're calling IDEA 2035. It's our 10-year strategic vision for the organization. One of our key enablers that we've identified is our operational excellence framework. And what does it mean, look, feel like to operate with excellence at IDEA? So, at the national level, the regional level, the campus level, what do we need to solidify, or what do we need to redefine in how we're engaging with one another, how we're engaging, operating with our end user, whether from the national level, that's our campuses, whether at the campus level, that is our families and students, right? So that has been kicked off, and we are approaching getting all of that solidified. So I'm really excited to get that done. And then lastly, I know this is cliche and everyone's saying it, but AI has been, really fascinating to experience. I've been dabbling in a few different platforms myself, and really just trying to figure out how we continue to use AI in a way that's just really helpful for our team members at all levels of the organization, to create more efficiencies, to improve their work, to ultimately improve student outcomes. But I think we just kind of scratched the surface and what's possible. So I'm also looking forward to see how that evolves over the next couple of years as well.
Love it. Any final question here? anything personally that you've found helpful in your own development as a leader? We always ask everyone that comes on the show this question, that things that we might be able to link in the show notes, whether it's, books or AI tools you're playing with late at night, or, other resources that you've found particularly useful.
I mentioned it earlier. I think I jumped ahead on the resource question, but I think your peers are your best resources.
Yeah.
And, there are so many more resources today than there used to be. I mean, back 7, 8 years ago, there weren't operations, charter COO operations resources. And there are so many now to tap into. I mean, this podcast is a great example, right? So I would say that. And the thing I would say too is, find a grounding framework for the way that your team, your executive team even is operating. I know we've dug into the Lencioni, framework for quite a while, at Idea. And if someone doesn't have a specific framework they're dug into and how they're, operating as a leadership team, then I would seek that out too. It always helps to have a grounding place um, to not only fall back into, but to know, like, if you're operating with intentionality, then good things are going to happen, right?
Mhm.
So if you don't know what you're operating for or how you're operating within, then you're likely just going to be moving and creating without true intentionality and probably not leading to great outcomes.
Perfect place to end. Layne, thanks so much for being generous with your time. Really appreciate you coming on the
Of
show.
course, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Charter School Insider. This show is brought to you by BuyQ, the group purchasing organization specifically for charter schools. Want to learn how to maximize your school's purchasing power? Join together with thousands of other charter schools by visiting buyq.org/sign up. BuyQ's purchasing program is free and has no obligations or commitments required. If you enjoyed today's episode, do us a favor and subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. If you have a question or feedback for us, we'd love to hear from you. Send us an email at podcast@buyq.org. Thanks, and we hope you'll tune in for the next one.